So our main story today concerns the country of Niger. And as I said earlier, we're going to cover it and we're going to unpack the situation that is happening there. As many of you will know, over a week ago there was a coup in the country that brought in a military junta, basically to govern the country then from now and going forward until hopefully they restore democracy. So what we're going to unpack that story, and we're going to first of all try to examine, for example, the role of France as a former colonial power plays in the geopolitics in the region, the Sahel. We were going to understand a little bit more about who is it that they're fighting, what are the causes of this military coup, and what was it that they were asking? What was it that the people living there were asking, and why is it that the voices were never heard in the first place? So without further ado, let's get into this. So, as I said, we're going to try and understand really, which is this situation, which is really complex, with a lot of moving parts, but I will try to explain everything to you step by step, right? So, we're going to start with this article that you see on your screen right now, and we're going to try and understand more about the context and what is the mainstream media saying about the situation, and then I will tell you as well what they're not saying about the situation and what were the causes and how we got to this point. So let's get into this. So Niger Coup division as ECOWAS military threats falls to play out. Okay. So as a deadline to restore Niger's democratic government passes, strong initial ECOWAS reaction to Niger's coup d'etat now appears divided. Okay. All eyes are on the next move by West African leaders who vowed to attack coup leaders in Niger if they failed to free the detained president and revert back to a democratically elected government. The deadline for the threat of force involving troops from Economic Community of West African States, so that ECOWAS. So for those of you who don't know, it's a little bit of it's a regional, I would say, organization, multilateral organization made up of country in West Africa. I'm going to cover it a little bit later, but all those countries they function a little bit like the EU, right? So people from those countries have passport issued in the name of that organization, and they all work together to achieve their economic and political goals. Okay, so that's one thing to remember very clearly from, or to know from the situation there. So what has been happening essentially was that there was a democratically elected government with a president as its head of state. Okay, and that president that president is actually from a minority, an ethnic minority in the country. I think they only make up about 0.4%. And that is a key thing to remember, and I will come back to it a little bit later. But essentially, the rest of the population, including the first, so the one who is the first in command and the second in command of the army right now, come from the majority ethnic group in the country. And so basically they resented the fact that this person who came from a minority, as I said, only represent 0.4% of the entire population, was in power, supported primarily by the West. Okay, so these leaders from West Africa who understand, given the situation that was developing there, they were threatening to send troops in the country to restore peace. Okay, so that is a key thing to understand. And I'll just move in here to show you one of the, so all the countries that make up the ECOWAS, so that those are Nigeria, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Benin, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Cape Verde. Okay, Cape Verde. So all of those countries, I think there are 14 of them. They make up this regional organization, and the main country, shall we say, within this organization is Nigeria, as the main economic and therefore political power in the region. Okay, so that is very, very key to understand. A few years ago, in fact, there was a coup in Gambia, and the community, the West African community there for ECOWAS decided to intervene and to restore peace in the country. Okay, now this is what they've been threatening to do for a long time, but as you've read there, the deadline has passed and really nobody knows what is happening. So while some observers said the bloc hardline stance was prompted by Western allies, the United States and France in particular, ECOWAS move reflect a different approach to its new chairman, Nigeria President Bola Tinubu, and they crystallized the fear of member state leaders who do not want the military getting their own ideas. Okay, analysts say. Coups are rarely carried out in isolation, especially when there are similar experiences, structure, and institution in neighboring countries. Okay, says Afolabi Adeka, I'm going to butcher the name, an Abuja-based political analyst. Militaries in the region exchange intelligence, so democratic administration are likely worried about the possibility of the soldiers engaging in similar acts. Okay, so there is obviously a fear that it will spread. So this is the context. So you have a democratically elected, shall we say, president who is definitely backed by the West and backed by the other head of states in the region. Okay, but what the main cause in my mind that led to this specific point is the economic situation. And in order to understand the economic situation and why is it so dire, you only have to remember that Niger basically has about over 20, just a little bit less than 22 million people. It is in a very in a region that is pretty much arid, and there's only about 10% of the land that is good for agriculture. So which means that everything else needs to come from uh, needs to be imported. So the population live with less than $2 a day. So there's no access to education, no access to access to food, access also to medical care. All of those things come into play. Okay, and that's why they were not happy. And another thing about Niger is that in the constitution, in the constitution they require the government not to upset the armed forces. That was written in the constitution. Okay, so that is very key to understand as well. Because they have a very long history basically of they have a very long history of coups dating back all the way to 1974 if I'm not mistaken, and in some years there had been attempted coups. I remember even as a child a gruesome story where there was a group of military. So they took over and then they just shot the president as he was sitting on the podium with other dignitaries, and they just fired on him and he died. So very, very tragic. But this is the reality in the situation, right? Now, Russia also has a place because so I'm going to put up the map again, once again. Mali over here, now they've kicked out France in Mali, they've kicked out France in Burkina Faso, um, and and now Niger as well. And so uh, enter Russia. Russia has basically offered these countries security guarantees to fight the rebels to the north and rebel or Islamists to the north, but there is a catch, and I'm going to cover it a little bit later to explain to you what appears to be Islamic insurgency actually hides behind that, and I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, hide behind it uh, ethnic division. So it is really, really key because as I started saying to you, those are the consequences of colonization when borders were drawn without understanding the internal dynamics. And all of those things remain, and we will see that a bit later. So Russia is basically telling all these countries, well, France has not done much. Plus, they colonized you. We didn't. We're going to bring support in terms of military intervention and all of that. So through the Wagner Group, and they're all over Mali now and Burkina Faso. Okay, and I'm going to show you a clip. I'm going to show you basically um, a clip from one of the station where I think it's the guy in Mali, the military command in Mali that is basically saying that if anybody tries to intervene, they will consider it either in Burkina Faso, not even their own country, yeah. And if they're trying to intervene in Niger, they will see it as a declaration of war, whether it's France that intervenes or the United States or anywhere else. They will see it as a direct threat, and they will therefore intervene militarily to protect the interests. Okay, so this is the reality, and I will then later on mention specifically why the situation in Niger is important for France, and why is it that France is watching development there very, very carefully. So, without further ado, let's get into.
4 avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger sera une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali. Je répète, 4 avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger s'assimilerait à une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali. Je répète pour une dernière fois, 4 avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger s'assimilerait à une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali.
So you heard it there yourselves, guys. So obviously these countries do not want any intervention by Western governments, be it the United States or France for that matter. And why? It's because they've seen that those countries have failed to live up to their claim to basically intervene and protect them against the insurgency in the north. Okay, so that is the primary reason why They are fed up with France that just a few years ago, about a decade ago, they saw as liberators. But now, whether in Mali or Burkina Faso and now in Niger, they're like, we don't want you here. We want you to go. Okay. So just remember that it is a situation that is still developing, and so I just wanted to bring you a little bit of the background on that. Now, why is this key for France? Okay, now there were talks earlier on where apparently the French special forces were stationed in Niger, wanted to intervene, but Macron pulled back, or at least hesitated to pull the trigger because he didn't want to give the appearance of colonialism or colonization again, and so he refrained from doing that. Okay. Um, but why is this key? Now, let's find out why is this key. So this is from Le Monde, which is one of the most popular newspapers in France. So let's read. So as I was saying, this is one of the most popular newspapers in France. So we're going to read about it. So, how dependent is France on Niger's uranium? Okay, so the military coup in Niger has raised concern about uranium mining in the country by the French group Orano and the consequences for France's energy independence. Okay, so 1 week after the military coup in Niger led by General Abdurrahman Tiani, France completed the evacuation of 600 French nationals on Wednesday, August 2nd. This uncertain political context is also beginning to raise economic concerns. In France, fears are particularly focused on the exploitation of uranium from Niger and the possible consequences of this energy independence, a natural resource essential to the operation of French nuclear power plants. Uranium mined in Niger has been exploited for over 4 decades by the French nuclear fuel cycle group Orano, formerly Areva. So, so there's 3 mines. The Ayer mines, whose operating company Somer is 63.4 owned by Orano, are based near the town of Arlit in the desert to the north of Niger. Okay, that region is key. I'm going to come back to it. And although the mine is nearing depletion, its operation has been extended until 2040. The Okanan mining site, around 10 kilometers from Arlit, the north as well, has been closed since the end of March 2021 with reserve exhausted after 4 decades of mining. Compagnie Minière d'Akuta, 59% owned by Orano, is now working on a project to redevelop its site. Finally, Orano holds 63.52 stake in the Urhanan mine. Imurhanan mine, located 80 kilometers south of Arlit, which is considered to be one of the largest uranium deposits, the world's largest uranium deposit. However, after an operating permit was issued in 2009, production of the site was suspended due to a lack of favorable market conditions. For the time being, Orano has announced that it will continue its mining activity despite the putsch in Niger. To date, activities at the operational site in Arlet and at the headquarters in Niamey are continuing with an adapted organization in the context of the curfew. Right. So, uh, they list here France's main suppliers of uranium. As you can see over here, you have Kazakhstan 27%, Niger 20%, Uzbekistan 19%. So Niger plays an important role in France supplies, but its importance is overestimated by some politicians. Okay, so as you've seen there for yourselves, so this is the situation. This is why France is heavily involved, because their strategic interest is threatened as it relates to the energy independence, right? But bear in mind, and now I'm going to deal with the issue, the insurgency in the north, right? Why is it that now the people are basically tired? So as you've seen that, the country looks around and sees that all their resources have been depleted. The poverty level has never changed, and they've always plummeted, because the reality is, for many people on the continent, the business model of all these countries, of all these companies, is that go to Africa, uh, build the minimum infrastructure required, get the resources out of the country or out of the continent as quickly as possible, and then you can go. One other things I need you guys to understand is that if you look at Mali, for example, over here, Mali is one of those countries, as well as Nigeria. They are landlocked. They don't have a way to get to um, they don't have a way to get to the ocean to to be able to sell off all the resources. Okay, and the people are just tired, so they're like, well, you don't build any infrastructure, education system is in tumble, we don't have healthcare, so what? And then you can't even take care of the threats to the north as it relates to terrorism. So why are you here again, and what are we doing? Why is this partnership so unequal? Okay, so that is what I believe a lot of countries in the West do not understand about the situation there. As long as it keeps going on like this, we're going to have a problem. We will continue to have huge or coup d'etat, shall we say, and a lot of people are going to keep dying. But the other thing is, it relates to the sanctions. Those sanctions, they never work. You can sanction all you want. These people, they don't care. You can sanction them, and maybe people at the top may suffer, but the the average Joe, the everyday people, they are gonna be the ones to suffer the most, right? And the idea is that eventually maybe they will put pressure on the government and get back to good graces with West. No, one of those things, for example, that they've learned through this situation, and that is why I believe the West has made a strategic mistake, is that they've by punishing Russia, a lot of other countries have learned what to do in order to avoid those sanctions altogether. So I predict that in 5 years' time, the West, especially America, they're not going to be able to talk about sanctions anymore. It's not going to work, because people have figured out ways to foolproof the economy in order to avoid, or at least to mitigate the impact of those sanctions. So that's why. Now I want to come back to the situation to the north of the country, right? So, and what the West and the Western media in particular describes simply as Islamic threat. Now, it is true, whether it is in Nigeria or Mali or everywhere else, there is definitely an influence of Islam or terrorism that is happening there. But you need to know what is hiding behind that, and what is hiding behind that is basically more ethnic division than religious one, because the majority of people living in the area that you see there of all these countries are mostly Muslim, by over 90% of them. They're mostly Muslim anyways. So it has nothing to do with religion per se or some kind of jihad that they have to that jihad that is going on here. Primarily, what is really key is the Tuareg people. And this is the map that you're looking at the moment. So the Tuareg, you found them, some of them in Burkina Faso, some of them in Mali, some of them in Algeria, some of them all the way to Libya, and some of them in Niger. Okay? So these are nomad tribes in all these countries, but they don't have a state of their own. A little bit like the Kurds. Okay, you'll find some in Iraq, some in Iran, some in Turkey. They don't have a state that they can call their own, and that brings in further problems. And this is the situation that we face, and it can be explained by that. So, and I think that's what the Western, most of the Western media doesn't want you to know or to hear about, because this story basically has been happening for a very, 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 very long time, and without any sort of resolution in sight. And that's why the people living there are just tired and want the West out of the equation and want the at least the money that the because the other thing is, you may have heard of what they call the franc CFA. So it's basically currency that is used by the group of former French colonies in West Africa that are using this currency, and then there's another group of Central Africa, like including Chad, for example, who are also using the franc CFA, and which is printed by France, and in return, these countries have to give 50% of all the exports to France to be kept in the at the Bank of France. So they rightly feel that there is a lot of the resources that are held by France, propping up France's status in the world. But those resources, or at least the benefit of those resources, are not shared by the people living there. And so this is what you get. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Let me know what you guys think. And I hope that you understand, this will help you understand the situation better, about what is happening at the moment in Niger. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. And I will try to bring more story like this to you. Until next time, peace.